The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian from Bringing Down Security this week. Part 2 of our discussion with Dan Borges is incoming. If you did not listen to our show last week, he's the author of Adversarial, Tradecraft, and Cybersecurity from Pact Publishing. Dan knows a little bit about Adversarial Tradecraft. He worked at a company dealing with that quite a bit. You might have heard of them. They're called CrowdStrike. He is finishing up his book, and it's available on Amazon in a Kindle format or a paperback format. Last week, we talked a little bit about why he wrote the book. We talked about the first, I'd say, half of the book in terms of, general what to look for, why Tradecraft is so important to understand. And this week, we finish up with the second half of the book, and I also ask him about the quality of the book and, some of the things that I've seen at some publishers is potentially books are, put out there, but they seem to be missing some quality. So we talk about some of the process involved with writing this book and why it was there. So hope you enjoy, and we'll be back next week with a new episode. So one thing that I've always wondered about with especially offensive books is the similes and the analogous of war and battle. And chapter 2 is you're preparing for battle, and you said this is all about preparing for competition, operations, or engagements. The other thing I love is the GitHub has a bunch of excellent markdown files. So like being able to scan accelerated network scans like Turbo Nmap or Mass Scan network monitoring. There's actually other things to help stymie attackers, which made me giggle a little bit when I saw some of those IP table rules where it was like blocking 70% of the SSH to scan the network. So you've got, so chapter 2 in preparing for battle, you're talking about long-term planning, operational planning. So this is, gathering information and understanding those things. You've got defensive signals collection. And the one thing I found interesting was offensive and defensive KPIs. Now, I've not been a bad guy before like that. Do I really care about my KPIs? Am I worried about, my boss coming in? It's like, well, Peter, you didn't get as many MSSPs as we thought, and I'm going to need you to write up those TPS reports. I mean, what does an offensive KPI look like for a bad guy?
Yeah. So on the CCDC Red Team, for example, we're very competitive. So we have our own web app, Trap House, where we record scores and it'll check in C2 times. Okay. So one of the there's tons, like the breakout time is a good one, right? Like as a group, how fast can we get credentials? That's something that, we always try to automate around and improve every year. Right. But another one is like achievements. Like one that we always play around with is like the all red board. Can we take down all the services? Like that's an achievement. But in general on the, when I'm putting together like the virtual CCDC region, right? Like what I really need is I need mentors and mentees on the red team. I need people that are okay and know their skills, and I need people that can help them execute and we'll learn from them. And for those, I like to collect these metrics, right? Like when this person does it the year before, how successful are they? Do they keep their team down? Or do they score a lot of points against their team? Do they take services down? Or, do they not score points and the services are down, which might just reflect it's the blue team taking themselves down. So it's more like lighthearted. Like we're not like, Dan, you didn't own enough boxes this year. Like shame on you. But we do collect different metrics, such as how long are our different implants staying around? Like which persistence mechanisms last longer? And the whole idea is just to understand our team, understand our performance. What are we doing, and how do we improve really? And that's really where we take away the big lesson is for the improvement is in between sessions. Which tools do we work on? Where do we automate? Where was our weakest point and our gap kind of that we can improve for the next year?
That's very interesting. And if you use it in terms of, Cozy Bear and all those things, when you're on the CCDC competition, specific teams, their tools, tactics, and procedures, their own run playbooks. That, oh, well, we used this on them last time. They'll probably be ready for that. We need to up our game and make that work, which is very much real world how the bad guys really work with this. The only thing the real world doesn't work here is the blue team doesn't seem to catch on as fast, in my opinion, and the red team is very much more has more alacrity, if you will, and can change their tactics a lot quicker. And the blue team sadly still seems to be a little behind in some respects. If you're not well skilled, so that's quite interesting. Okay, I definitely see that.
I do talk about that as well in this chapter with planning. Is a big part of that is like contingency planning. Like on the red team, like almost every year I'll have multiple different C2 channels set up, and I don't use them all, right? But the idea is like, what if I'm going against a team that really understands Sliver well? Like they read the book and they're like, oh, I know Dan, I know he's going to use Sliver, and I've already written detections for it. You know what I mean? Right. So in those situations, I like to have fallbacks, and they could be different egress channels like local network or the internet or different protocols. But the idea is contingency plans. And you're right, that's a lot harder to do on the blue team because of this like upfront cost of infrastructure setup. Like the blue team, in my mind, is almost more under the pressure of the principle of time, where they need to have things automated. Otherwise, they're going to be really slow responding to each system and digging through logs after we're already there. So the blue team like really needs to automate things. And I think contingency planning with the blue team's a lot harder, right? Like are you going to run 2 log pipelines or 2 EDR agents? Most people aren't. It's much more difficult.
Right. Yeah. So once they get past your EDR, your network sniffer, your DLP system or whatever it is, they've got carte blanche, and you're not going to be able to, well, okay, we're going to get rid of the CDR and put a brand new EDR in. And it's like, nah, you can't move that fast. So that's why I guess it helps to have a good working relationship with your Yara rule sets and your threat intelligence feeds and what have you, because they help you out with that. So
yeah, you got to bring it up in the next change control meeting if you want to deploy something.
Exactly. It's so slow. It's much slower to get the changes done on the blue team, I feel like.
Right. Yep.
And because there's a lot more risk there too, in a way, right? Like if you take email down for the company, like they're going to be pretty upset with you.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of so one of the things that I told Dan before the show was the excellent graphs and charts and decision trees and everything that are in the book, but also on the GitHub site that are really excellent. I mean, going through talking about planning, exploitation, installation, activation, command and control. I mean, it walks you through exactly the decision making and what happens, and going back and forth between the phases on that. So I don't like making these things, and I can tell that you've probably spent many an hour working on this and logically plotting these out. So much respect to you for your artwork and for just doing that proper. So these are really awesome stuff.
Yeah, the thing I wanted to capture there is this thing called like a reaction correspondence, and it's when you have 2 people competing against each other and they select strategies. It's as the one starts to figure out the other person's strategy, they adapt theirs and they change it, and that like reacting off of each other is called a reaction correspondence. And in my mind, I see this everywhere in security. It's the cat and mouse game of security, right? I just finished this book, Rootkits and Bootkits, and it was such a great example of this reaction correspondence where people were like, oh, we got these rootkits, and then Microsoft comes around and like, yeah, but now we have a kernel driver signing, right? And everything's enforced there. And they're like, okay, we'll just go lower in the stack and attack the boot order. And then, they come out with more and more protections. So it's this like escalating series of strategies that I try to capture. And I wanted to get people thinking about that, right? Like security is not perfect. It's an adversarial game. It's you versus some other team, some other person, some other group that's trying to outthink you. And you kind of have to think a step ahead of where you're at. Like, what are they going to do? What are they going to come in and try and trick you with?
Yes. Okay. So I was looking that up because I thought I'd seen or heard of that before. That's some game theory stuff you've got working on there with some Nash equilibria and whatever. So there's the link in our show notes to a Wikipedia article, but there's a number of white papers on that as well, talking about best response or reaction correspondences. Trying to create that equilibrium, or the concept of best response is central to the contribution at which each player in a game selects the best response or one of the best responses to other players' strategies. So there you go. Here's your game theory for the day. If you want to just poke around in that forever, because that's a really deep hole there. So
and in my mind, there is no best strategy yet in the security industry. It's like we keep trying things every year. We come out with like EDRs or network detection, and we're trying all these strategies. And I think they are all valid. Like they all work and they can all catch the attacker. It's just a matter of like thinking about what the attacker is going to do and where you're going to catch them in that network versus, just deploying things blindly, I think.
Right. Yep. So number 4, chapter 4 is about blending in, which is excellent. It's, learning to lay low, like you said, and trying to, I'm good. I'm just another DLL, or I'm just another executable, or, sending, all your data out to a Russian website. It's pretty legitimate, whatever, we're just going to do that.
So, with chapter 3, I go like deep into process injection, and then I kind of show how like it's abnormal and you can detect it. And the whole reason for that is like, I think fileless malware is great and you want to live in memory, but then at a certain point, like you do hit these trade-offs, right? Like you guys were saying with hexacorn, there's tons and tons of like fuzzy process injection techniques, like where it's, you might put a DLL on disk and then you use something else to load it. And all of a sudden you're using different API calls and it looks different to the EDR. So, it's like Brian was saying earlier, like there's so many possibilities of ways to get this stuff into memory. You just have to know what is possible, like what is out there. So I go from the in-memory stuff to saying like, okay, now that we've covered that and that's obvious, like what are all these trade-offs that they might do? Like me personally, I like to operate in memory, but I will often persist. And to persist, you need to put something on disk and you need to have some kind of like, automatic execution start point thingy, point to that. So there is forensics that can be pieced together to like, recreate the scenario or the attack.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Betcher knows a little bit about that, injection points and all that. He runs his LogMD against things to find folks like yourself, not necessarily living in memory all the time. So it's a pretty awesome tool. So Mr. Betcher, what does that look like for an injection point? Could that be a registry key, or could that be a startup item? What is an artifact for an injection point?
You're talking about persistence.
Yeah,
persistence can be located in tons of places. A scheduled task, or a service. It can be in a lot of different places in the registry, right? You have startup folders, which are easy to detect. And I've seen malware actually live in memory. On shutdown, it writes to the registry a startup folder, and then on boot up, that DLL runs through run DLL 32, and then since he's now in memory again, it deletes the run key at that point. So they're only in memory at that point.
Right.
It's very advanced stuff. It's very
cool. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the diagrams you've got here on your chapter 4 about blending in is abusing CDNs for hiding malicious traffic. Is that a good way? I mean, what is the deal with using CDNs? Is that just because it makes DNS lookups impossible because it automatically goes to Cloudflare instead of, Bob's evil site.ie or whatever?
Yeah, it's the example of domain fronting. And unfortunately, when I wrote the example, it was at the beginning of this year and you could still use domain fronting in Azure, but they've since blocked that within recent months, because it's such a massive issue, right? Like what you're doing is you're smuggling your data within trusted DNS domains, right? Like, so if let's say I was on Azure back in the day and I was doing the domain fronting, your options are either HTTPS interspection, right? Like you break HTTPS at your network border and you look into it. On host, like getting more insight into the packet level. Is the host header different than the URL? Or blocking all of Microsoft, like in Azure, right? Like these are really crappy options. So I can see why like they finally blocked this and they don't want people abusing their CDN like this. But yeah, the domain fronting or like borrowing somebody else's DNS name to like smuggle your traffic through their domain is definitely a very like real thing. And you almost see like different plays on that too, like with hosted services. Like Discord's a great one, right? Like I saw a while back, people were hosting malware on the Discord CDN, and then you would just download what looks like a Discord link or a file or an image, right? And it's malware. So I do think those CDNs get abused a lot, and I like to think DNS. Like in chapter 4, we show the example of changing like the sliver callback to use like a long polling DNS, right? And I go to show how like DNS logs are, in my mind, very helpful, like for understanding traffic and just like a very good log to collect. And this is just an example of that reaction correspondence of how the attacker can then like still slip through DNS logs by abusing somebody else's CDN.
Right. So you've mentioned Sliver a couple of times, and what is Sliver? Is it a tool you're created, or is it something that is open source?
I didn't create Sliver. It's an open source command and control framework by Bishop Fox, which is a security company out of the UK. And I really like it. It's very fully featured, and it's just like a really nice Go based command and control framework. They have a like one neat feature is like multiplayer, so you can have a single server and you can have multiple different people connect to it and interact with shells, for example. So it's just a nice like newish command and control framework. And one of the guys that develops that is on our CCDC red team, Joe Moloch. So it was nice to also have an example where I had like a developer that I could reach out to and ask questions, or look through the code, and the code's freely available to everybody. So I'm a big fan of open source C2 frameworks. I know they catch a lot of heat because some of the opponents of them say like they provide capabilities to average people who can then use them to attack. But I think it's a good way to learn and understand these capabilities by everybody, right? Like defenders and attackers can both see this and understand it and try it in their environment.
Right. Okay.
As you say, it's it's indistinguishable from magic if you don't know how these attacks take place, right? So it's learning how these attacks could work helps you better defend them against
exactly them. That was the whole point of the book for me, was like, let's shine a light on these things that we're using and help people understand how to detect them and fight them. And I do use a lot of analogies to like war or conflict, because in my mind this is human conflict just aided with tools, right? Like it is two people with different goals trying to like exert their will over something. So right. I do think there's conflict here.
Okay. Yeah. So chapters 5 and 6, chapter 5 is talking about, now that we're blending in it seems like the second half of the book is more of, okay, now you want to eject, or you want to hassle or put up roadblocks, or, put out some spike strips, metaphorically speaking, of the attacker to slow them down, or to manipulate them into going somewhere else, or to, move their traffic into a lab environment where you could potentially analyze it in the future, put up a honeypot or what have you. Chapter 5 is about active manipulation. They talk about, topics like, these are the things that they would do to deceive your opponents. But again, you're talking about rootkits and backdoors. And so there's the one that made me laugh out loud when I saw it was the IP tables tricks markdown, where it's like, if you notice that somebody scanning large amounts of your network, over SSH or something like that, there are IP tables rules inside this markdown that you can use to randomly drop 70% of the inbound traffic, which is great as long as you're not the one who's trying to get into your own environment. That would not be a good thing to drop 70% of your traffic. But why did you create these for hassling people? Or were you just trying to do it because in the spirit of competition, you want to stymie them as much as possible? Because I mean, we've heard about active countermeasures. I mean, John Strand and the folks at Black Hills were working on active defense for a while. You know, some folks were like, well, you shouldn't hack back, and this is not hacking back. This is just being a dick to the attackers by, you know, tar pitting or doing whatever. So is that the only use that these are for, is hassling people, or can you actually do things other, like learn about your environment, learn about, you know, how traffic is being ran through your network?
Yeah, I do think there's a number of different uses. I think I felt like this was a core concept because when I looked at like rootkits and all of this, there was so much manipulation going on. Like I think of Stuxnet, right? And like in my mind, that's a great rootkit because it shows the user that everything's okay, right? Like you get these signs and the data that comes back to you like lies to you. So again, in the vein of like what is possible and what could people do, I felt remiss if I didn't talk about rootkits. If I didn't say the tools you use could be lying to you. You know what I mean? Because I've actually had that in an incident response case. Like I've arrived at a box and my logs were missing. And I was like, where are the logs, right? And we scraped the disk and the logs were deleted. And then it turned out this person had replaced our entire Apache service with like a backdoored Apache service. So there was so much weirdness there. And I've used the rootkits and I've seen the students just have no idea what's going on, right? But whenever you do these things of manipulation, the way, you know, and you change somebody's perspective, it depends how you look at it, right? Like it's a lie, right? So if you look at it from a different perspective, you can see the lie. So if you're looking at a rootkit on a disk and it's hiding the kernel modules it loads, but then you, let's say, do dead disk forensics and you use like the sleuth kit, then you'll see the kernel module, right? Because it's not actively running code and it's still there. So I wanted to kind of like give people these ideas to manipulate and detect the manipulation because I had seen it there in a lot of these tools. And on the blue team side, like it gets like you were seeing, like really wild. Like I think the port spoof stuff is a great example of basically like showing the attacker a fake picture. And when you no longer have your data, like your network data, and you're looking at a server and you see every single port open, it's a different game. You have no idea what to do, right? Like you don't have all this telemetry you're used to collecting. And I find when like you're a person versus another person, this isn't like traditional security advice, right? Like this isn't hardening the server or changing the passwords. Like this is very much like adversarial tactics, like one person versus another and tricking that person. And that's what I was trying to like kind of show does get applied in some of these competitions or even at the higher levels like malware.
Right on. Okay.
That kind of plays on our long held belief and the way we were taught about computers, where, you know, they would always tell us, I mean, computers never lie. They never do. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Until somebody tells them to.
False. It's yep. Until somebody's behind the computer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, and I just had to give these students these techniques, like how to check your system integrity, right? Like, is the data you're seeing coming out on the network the same as the stuff you're seeing on the host, right? And those kinds of techniques just help them ask these questions. And again, I'm not sure if we touched on this in the interview, but like in my mind, you know, I show an example with like Reptile, but these are just examples for a larger thought process, right? Of like, can I trust my tools? Am I being deceived?
Right. So you've added a couple of things in here, and I'm like, I don't see any reason why a blue teamer would need that except to be a bad guy, like the fake sudo.sh in section 5 there. It's like, I don't know if I'm old and curmudgeon-y now, but it's like the first thing I look at is, how's a bad guy going to use this good person tool? For instance, you know, the fake sudo stuff, it's like, okay, so now you've got a keylogger that you can, you know, call, or it's a bash function that steals passwords and sudo's called. And I'm like, how would a blue teamer want to use that?
No, that's a red team technique. Well,
obviously.
One of the ideas though is like you could keylog your users of a system, right? Like if they're not doing anything wrong, and you could like that's what a like bash command history is, right? And then just running alerts on that. So we do look at some different ways to do that. But yeah, I don't think you should be stealing people's credentials as a blue team.
Right. Well, and plus, if you're a blue teamer, you probably have higher sudo access anyway. But if you were just trying to be nefarious, that's a different way. The other thing I like about what you've got here in terms of code is I haven't seen Netcat at all yet, which I think is great. I don't know, maybe I haven't looked everywhere, but it seems like Netcat or NCAT, NCAT, of course, being the better option because it supports SSL. But you use a lot of IP tables, which is great. And these things are easily deployable out to the environment. So if you've got a bunch of Docker containers or Windows or Linux boxes, almost Windows, I think I'm sure you could probably get IP tables to run in Windows instead of Windows Firewall. But
I have a invoke pass or not. There's a IP blocking in that MD. There's the net new net firewall rules. So Windows.
Yep, I see those. Yeah. So I mean, these are easily deployable in terms of being able to quarantine systems out, like the network quarantine stuff, which is great. But there's also blocking IP addresses in real time, which is pretty awesome. I love the fact that, most everybody that at least a few years ago when I was going through stuff, is like everything was NCAT or NetCat to be able to, do ports and to set up things. And using IP tables to great advantage here. It just shows the power of IP tables that most people may not see. So, or the Windows Firewall rule sets as well, the net new firewall as well. So we have about 10 minutes left. One of the things that I asked you before the show was you wrote this book, and it's great, and it's got a lot of tools in it. And in 6 months, it's going to be out of date. How do you feel about that when I ask you that question? Obviously, it must have been something you thought about, but we see that a lot. It's like, if you read the original Metasploit book from No Starch, it's very dated. There's been a lot of changes in Metasploit. It took a little longer than 6 months, but I was like, is this book going to be useful in a year? Is it going to be useful in 2 years? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really tried to with the principles and just trying to get people into these mentalities of thinking about, well, how does somebody one up and how do you go up on that? Right. And that's really, I think, the lessons of the book, right? Like, we're trying to think about conflict from two people competing in a sense, right? And the tools and the languages, I'm agnostic to them, right? Like, there's things that I want though. I want their credentials. I want to persist on their machines. I want to hide from them. And I want to manipulate what they can see. And those are the lessons that I'm really trying to show and teach, right? And I try to get that with the principles. And whenever I talk about a tool, I try to bring it back to the principles, right? So I think Sliver's great. Like, I think Bishop Fox and Joe and Ronan and all these guys that work on it do an amazing job, right? But I don't think you should get complacent with one tool. I think the point is understanding that there's many tools out there, and the idea is that you want to innovate, and you want to, if you're on the offensive side, you want to change your methodology so that you're hard to predict and that the attacker can't understand you. And you want to come in with something kind of innovative and new and different. And if you're on the defensive side, you really need to think adversarially, right? Like, if somebody's in your environment, how can you get them out? How can you stop them? And a lot of times it starts with understanding root cause and how did they get in and working back their thing. What are their motivations? Where are they trying to go? And the more you understand your adversary, I think kind of the more you can deceive them and better them. And that's what I'm really trying to get across in this book. And some of the techniques I use, like the Libre tar pit, where we change the TTL of the packets. Actually, it's the window size of the packet they change to 0. So what happens is the attacker comes in and scans them, and then your system starts replying with hundreds of thousands of packets that have a window size of 0, and it keeps the connection open. So it's like, oh, I got your data. Here's your data. There's 70 million more packets with your data, but here it is. And those techniques, I think, are a way to like outthink the different methodology of the attackers, right? Like, and to trick them. And so that's a 10-year-old technique that was in a tool, and I couldn't even get the tool to compile anymore, right? But somebody had integrated it to the IP tables X add-ons. So people are taking these old techniques and carrying them forward because they kind of work, like rootkits. They still work when you can manipulate somebody like that.
Right.
Does it affect legit traffic? Say you've got an enterprise website going on.
Yeah, you would have to specify the ports that you want to target or not target. So you would want to avoid your legitimate services, I think, in those situations, like the IP tables one where we drop the traffic. You definitely target the port it's on. And sometimes when you're talking about adversaries, right? Like when you're talking about an attacker, there's many ways to get to somebody, right? Like there's the 5 Ds of defense: deny, to block, deny, disrupt. I forget all of them right now, but it's like there's many ways that you can kind of mess with the attacker, and one of those I think is to frustrate them. So if I'm an attacker on a system and I'm constantly landing in honeypots, or like I have a C2 connection but I can't get anything back from it, like I keep landing these shells but nothing happens, right? Like that stuff's going to drive me up a wall as an attacker, and eventually I'm going to move on to different systems.
Yep. Deflect, dominate, distract, disarm, disable.
I think so. Let's see.
Well, this is active self-protection. So this is like personal protection, but yeah. Anyway, I'm sure we can find those eventually. So, So we have a few minutes left, and one of the things I wanted to ask about writing a book was, how did you pitch this to Pact? Because they do a lot of technical stuff already. What was did they come to you? How does that work when you're working on a book? I mean, there must be folks out there that think, well, I've got a great idea, I want to write this thing, I don't know what to do. So how did you decide that you wanted to go with Pact? Because I mean, there's No Starch, there's O'Reilly, there's other folks. I mean, we're not advertising for Pact, obviously, but I mean, it's like, what made you go to them versus the other ones? Was it just ease of use, or their environment? Did they give you more money than the other ones? I don't know. I don't know what motivates you.
So Pact had reached out to me. And they're doing this expert insight series where I'm pretty sure they're like, crawling through LinkedIn or trying to find a bunch of people to write these books.
Okay.
And my experience with Pact was very much like deadline driven. Let's get the content out. There wasn't really like an emphasis on quality, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Right. So I ended up getting all these extra reviewers, like Joe DeMessi with the Sliver team. Like I had to bring him in because I really wanted these like quality reviewers that were like very in touch with the material. Okay. So I think they were very driven on just like turning books around and getting them out, and in that sense, like I read this Rootkits and Bootkits book, and that was with No Starch. I think they said that was like 8 years in production, right? Like, so like it took them 8 years to write, right? So there's obviously different teams care about, the effort that they're putting into these books, right? Or the quality or whatever. But yeah, it was very interesting because when they originally reached out, they wanted to like search for market sizes and understand like what is the book we could write that would capture the most market size. And, they wanted me to write like a programming language book. I was interested, but like in the back of my mind, I had been doing these CCDC competitions, and I was like, there's something I really want to like, tell these students. There's something that I really feel like if I wrote, it would benefit these people in these competitions. It would make my job harder. And that's kind of where I just kept pushing it.
That's good.
And I was like, I really just like, I think with the process injection, like I just, I remember talking to some of these students, and like the concepts were very vague to them and very like amorphous. And I was like, well, like here's all this position independent shell code, and here's like different techniques for getting it into memory and running it. And I just wanted to kind of like put that down and help these students with that. And that's the direction the book went in.
That's cool. Yeah. I wasn't out on Pact, but I have read more than one of those books, not from a hacking point of view, but from like, I think I read one on data science or whatever. And there was a couple of others, and I was like, I really worry about the quality here, but it sounds like you've actually gone out and had folks, make sure that it doesn't suck. So that's good. I don't know what the process is there, but I was just wondering that there must be folks out there looking to, write a book, and maybe they, don't know how it works out, or, if you were solicited, obviously you were, but what it takes to pitch those kinds of things. So that was quite interesting. Okay. Mr. Betcher, we have about 4 minutes. Oh, sorry, Dan, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I could do it again, I think I would put a lot more consideration into that. I think the editorial team and the publishing team does have a lot of effect on a book. Like, for example, the cover was very hard to get through. That was like weeks of negotiating, like just to get some cover art, and
right.
It was very difficult.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there's only so many animals in the world, but they don't do animals there or whatever. So, yeah. But okay, so we have about 3 minutes left. Mr. Betcher, do you have any other thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
Yeah, about anonymity. You have a chapter on that, or a section on anonymity. Are you talking about VPN companies from the attacker's perspective, like
yes.
Private VPN, and what is a public VPN?
Yeah, so
anonymity network.
There's a company, a very specific company that I don't want to mention because I don't want to get sued, but they provide they provide a free VPN for users that want a VPN, right? And it goes to their corporate location, and then they leave out of this corporate location. And then they provide a paid VPN that you can sign up for that lets you egress out of people's homes, out of all the public VPN users' homes. And you can change this. So as an attacker that wants to simulate botnets or like ubiquitous internet, attacks, right? Something like that is incredible, right? Now I'm not just coming from AWS, or now I'm not coming from Azure, right? Now I'm coming from Afghanistan, or I'm coming from, Lebanon, from some guy's home. You know what I mean? All around the world, like from residential IPs.
That's called Tor, isn't it?
It isn't. It is and it isn't, because like Tor, you come out of Tor exit nodes, right? Which is like very identifiable. Like here, I'm coming. If Brian Brake uses the public VPN, I'm coming out of your residential IP space, like your home IP.
Oof. Yeah, let's not do that. Yeah, that's probably not a good thing. Yeah.
Hey, free's not free.
Yeah, exactly. Not that free.
Okay. So, yeah, I would say, go get the book. It sounds like it's been vetted quite well. If you're wanting to up your red team or even your blue team game, being able to stymie bad guys, or be a bad guy yourself. No, wait, that doesn't work. If you want to be a better red teamer, let's call that. Yeah. Go check out the book. There's a link in our show notes to an Amazon link. It's also in Kindle format, so you can buy the electronic version and have it immediately, or you can wait for the Dead Tree copy. It's fine. Dan, how would people find you if they wanted to talk more about red teaming? I understand that you are in the market for a new vocation. So what kind of job are you looking for?
Yeah, I will be back on the market soon for honestly, I just enjoy security. I think I would do incident response again. As well. I just like the whole conflict, like the idea of two parties that are trying to fight over this network or whatever it is, like get in or kick them out. I have some really fun incident response stories as well. But you can reach me at Injection. That's 1NJECTION at Twitter. And then also my email is a.db@gmail.com. That's Alpha Hotel Delta Bravo @gmail.com. Yeah, and one thing, like if you want to reach out and you want to learn more, I run the virtual CCDC region, which is every February. So if you're trying to get involved in red teaming and you want to learn and get some hands-on with these techniques, please sign up. And then another thing that I could always use help with is I'm one of the directors for the Collegiate Cyber penetration testing competition, which is, it sounds like pen testing, but we actually just build a company with detections, and then we let students hack our company. Kind of, role reversal from the CCDC stuff.
Nice.
So we can always use volunteers there if people want to get involved. and help set this stuff up, just check out globalcptc.org and please volunteer.
Global CPTC, globalcptc.org.
Do you intentionally leave some avenues of attack? You said you built a company, right?
Oh yeah. This last year we did a NGPO. It was power and water electric dam, and it was ridiculous. Just all kinds of students overflowing the dam. We flooded towns. I think this is like our 6th year going into it. And in the beginning, we tried to do very like explicit attack trees. We were like, oh, you'd have to get this credential to pivot into this environment. And now we make Swiss cheese environments, like just holes everywhere in many ways to pivot. And it was really cool. This last year, we had teams find O days in some of the applications we were using in between the regionals and the final competitions. And then, they got the actual products patched as part of the result of the competition.
Very nice. Virtual CCDC. I'll go look that one up later. Cool. All right. So thank you for joining us. I'm actually sorry you're leaving the Pacific Northwest, because I would love to have you come out to our local CSEC East and speak. Well, actually, if we still do the virtual CSEC East, I could definitely still have you on, because we do a Slack. We actually use the Slack, and we have about 10-15 people show up. We're actually doing our first in-person CSEC East in like 18 months tomorrow night at Black Lodge on the 7th of July. So it's going to be an interesting time.
Oh, I might show up.
We still have plenty of space. I think we're just going to be out in the parking lot. We're not even going to try to go into Black Lodge. It's a maker space up here in the in Redmond, Washington. And also a Twin Peaks reference. Now that I've watched the show, I know what the Black Lodge is all about.
Yeah, that's the first link I got is Twin Peaks. No, but that sounds awesome. I might actually, is that open tomorrow?
Yeah. Go to meetup.com, look for CSEC East or CSEC. I run both of them now, sadly. So, I mean, not sadly, but it's it's the Seattle based one. And then the one is East, which is my original one that I created for everybody in the Redmond, Bellevue, Factoria area of the across Lake Washington. From 6 to 8, I think we're going to do it tomorrow night. So bring your own food, and we'll be at Black Lodge in Redmond. But so we have a conference called InfoSec Campout. If you've not heard of it, welcome. We have about 10 tickets left. We're doing about 40 people. We had a camping portion, but those tickets are gone. We have a conference ticket, which you can come out at like 8 a.m. and spend all day. You just don't have the luxury of, going into a tent and being in a sleeping bag, but you could still come by all Friday afternoon and Saturday and come hang out with us. So we still have some tickets for that if you're up here in the Seattle area. I do believe we have all of our speakers slots set up and ready to go. We are definitely looking forward to doing that at the end of August. So August 27th, 28th, and 29th. Actually, August 27th to 28th. 29th will be everybody packing up and getting the hell out. But if you're interested in joining that, you can always go to our website, infoseccampout.com. You can get t-shirts. I actually picked up a couple of t-shirts. They're really nice. Miss Berlin did the logo for those, and they're powered by Nuka Bell, who is running the store for us, and she turned them into some lovely graphic art for us. So come out for some well-mannered frivolity. We're still actually looking for a workshop if somebody wants to do a workshop for us. We'll have games. I've actually asked Miss Berlin about doing a defense tabletop, IR tabletop kind of stuff using her D&D method, not to be confused with the Wizards of the Coast. And so we're looking at doing something like that as well. So that's going to be some good fun times there for everybody. And you come out, have some s'mores, get some bug bites, and get involved and meet people. So come join us, infoseccampout.com. Podcast, you can find us on Twitter at BreakSec, BRAKESEC. We're also at www.breakingsecurity, BRAKEING security.com. And Miss Berlin, you can find her at InfoSister, INFOSYSTIR. She's also CEO of and organizer of Hackers Mental Health Organization, and you can get that at Hackers Health on Twitter. And I think it's InfoSec role play on Twitter as well as her tabletop exercise stuff. But she's doing a lot of workshops at conferences again in person, trying to work those out. She'll be at DEF CON, I believe. And if you are going to DEF CON, go find her and tell her that I told her, I told you she was awesome, because she is. So she's a very Renaissance person. She does a lot of stuff and does great work. So, sorry, Mr. Betcher, you have LogMD. We talked about that a little bit tonight. Defensive tool, incident response, digital forensics type tool for gathering information about people like Evil Dan down here, who's trying to hack all the things. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, not only does it help you detect attacks, it will also help you harden your system, Windows systems. So Sweet. Yeah, check it out. Run the tool and it'll tell you what you need to do to get things to where you could actually detect a lot of these attacks.
Yeah, right? That probably costs like $1 million or something, right? Like Brazilian dollars. Oh, really?
Close. We have a free version, so go check it out.
No shit. Okay, right on. Log-md.com, yeah?
You got it.
Okay, and Mr. Betcher's Twitter is?
At Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. Fantastic.
Okay, so I want to say thank you to all of our Patreon donors for their help and assistance, time. They give us a little bit in our tip jar every month to pay for hosting fees, Zoom accounts, and just putting out a weekly podcast is it's worth it to see the tip jar come in and know that you're loved. Our podcast is always going to be free, but if you have a couple of bucks, or your company does matching, you can give us a donation through our 501c3, the InfoSec Education Foundation, and help out the podcast. Or, if you want to sponsor the conference. I mean, we're not taking sponsors, but if you want to come and help sponsor the conference, you can do so. We won't turn you away. So come and reach out and talk to us about, that. So, but we appreciate everybody on our Patreon for donating money and helping out where they can. And, if you're interested in joining our Slack, you can send us a DM to BreakSec on Twitter, or our email is bds.podcast@gmail.com. So Dan, thank you for coming on. If you decide to write the second edition of this, we'd love to have you join us again for whatever bad shit is being happening again in the near future. Or if you decide you want to write a defense book instead of a red team book, feel free to, like what the other side of the CCDC looks like, instead of popping shells and, and all that. If you want to focus more on that, we wouldn't turn you away if you'd like to join us.
Thank you. This has been awesome. I've really enjoyed talking. It's been great.
Very cool. All right. Well, that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves, because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.